turned the wheel, guiding the car down a narrow dirt road that ended at a small cabin by the lake. The weight of the entire week pressed down on his shoulders. Endless meetings, endless traffic, the endless noise of the city. Here, in the heart of the forest. The only sounds he wanted to hear were the wind in the branches and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. The wooden cabin was smaller than it looked in the photo. But for one person, it seemed perfect. All he wanted was a few days of fishing, peace, and uninterrupted sleep before settling in. He stopped at a small village nearby for supplies. The old man who owned the store stared at Eric with a strange look. When Eric mentioned the cabin by the lake with excitement, the old man's smile vanished. The lines on his forehead deepened, and he said in a quiet, serious voice, "It's a beautiful forest, but it demands respect." Eric smiled and said he just wanted to rest. The old man handed him the bag, and while staring into his eyes, repeated, "There's only one rule, don't go out at night." Eric shrugged, probably a local legend to scare strangers. But on the way back, when two other locals repeated the same sentence with the same tone, he felt a slight unease. It was as if the name they had given this forest tasted like poison to them. The first night, he lit a small fire in the fireplace and sat in the armchair. The silence was so deep he could hear his own heartbeat. Just as his eyelids grew heavy and he was on the verge of sleep, he heard a sound from outside, a faint, muffled sound lost in the wind. He strained his ears. There was no doubt. It was the sound of a girl crying, coming from among the trees. For a moment, he thought about getting up and going out, but exhaustion and common sense stopped him. It was probably a wild animal, or just his imagination. He closed his eyes and told himself this was why he came here, to disconnect from anything human. The second night, the sound returned, this time clearer and closer. He could no longer ignore it. It was a cry full of pain and loneliness that broke the heart. Eric hesitantly picked up his flashlight and opened the cabin door. The cold night air hit his face. The flashlight beam danced on the massive tree trunks, creating monster-like shadows. He walked toward the lake, where the sound seemed to be coming from. And then he saw her, under the silver moonlight. By the water's edge, a girl was standing. Her back was to Eric, and her long, dark hair fell over her shoulders. Her hair looked wet. Eric cautiously took a few steps forward. "Hey?" His voice was louder than expected in the night silence. "Are you okay?" The girl didn't move. Her body remained still and motionless, but her head slowly began to turn, not naturally, but with a dry sound, like cracking bones. Her head turned and turned and turned, but until her face was completely facing Eric, while her body was still turned away. Her eyes were two white, milky orbs with no life in them. Her skin was gray and bruised, as if she had been underwater for a long time. But the most terrifying part was her mouth. A deep gash stretched from both sides of her lips to near her ears, carving a permanent, inhuman smile onto her face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Before Eric could scream or run, the girl vanished into the darkness with impossible speed. Eric ran back to the cabin, gasping for air, and locked the door behind him. His heart pounded so hard his chest hurt. This was the beginning of the hunt. Suddenly, the cabin door he had just locked burst open on its own with a loud bang. A long, crooked shadow moved across the ceiling and vanished. For a brief second, he saw the same girl in the farthest corner of the room, staring at him. And then she disappeared again. The silence of the cabin was broken by a dual sound, a mix of an innocent child's cry and a muffled, demonic laugh that seemed to come from the bottom of a well. Terror overtook him. Eric burst out of the cabin and started running into the forest. But the forest wasn't the same anymore. The paths changed. Trees that weren't there minutes ago blocked his way. It was as if the forest was a living maze, playing with him. He reached the small pier and jumped into the fishing boat. He rowed with all his might to the middle of the lake, He thought he was safe on the water, but suddenly the boat rocked violently. From beneath the black surface, two gray, wrinkled hands shot out and grabbed the edge of the boat. Ellen emerged from the water, her white eyes fixed on Eric, shaking the boat with inhuman strength to pull him in. Eric smashed the oar against her hands and, terrified, rowed toward the other side of the lake. On the other shore stood an old, abandoned shack. Eric took shelter inside. It was pitch black. He turned on his flashlight with shaking hands. The light swept over rotting walls and broken furniture. Nothing was there. He breathed a sigh of relief. He clicked the flashlight again to check the surroundings. This time, when the light came on, Ellen's face was inches from his own. Her slashed mouth was open, and her white eyes stared into his soul. Eric screamed and fell backward. Ellen vanished into the darkness again. Eric scrambled out of the shack and started running once more. This time, he heard the rustling of leaves behind him. He turned and saw something that froze the blood in his veins. Ellen was chasing him on all fours, with incredible speed and moving like a broken spider. Her body twisted into unnatural shapes, and with every movement, the sound of her breaking bones echoed through the silent forest. Eric, with no strength left to run, collapsed onto the desolate beach of the lake. His feet sank into the cold sand, bringing him to his knees. In front of him, the remains of an old wooden pier jutted out of the water, rows of crooked pillars stretching into the misty darkness of the lake. Ellen's screams behind him had stopped. Silence took its place, a silence heavier and more terrifying than any scream. Eric panted, staring at the pier. Something about that broken, rotting image was familiar. Too familiar. And then, a memory he had suppressed with all his might for 17 years surfaced with brutal clarity. He was here 17 years ago, a 10-year-old boy. Ellen was here too, wearing that same school uniform. They were playing on this very pier. Ellen, always the braver one, laughed and told Eric she could walk to the end of the pier, where the planks stuck out of the green, murky water. Eric knew it was dangerous. He told her not to, but Ellen just laughed and called him a coward. Eric said nothing. He just stood and watched. Ellen stepped carefully onto the shaky planks. She reached the end and waved triumphantly at Eric, but on the way back, the sound of rotting wood snapping echoed in the afternoon silence. Ellen gave a short scream and, in an instant, vanished. The cold lake water closed over the empty space. Eric ran to the edge in panic. He could see Ellen struggling underwater, his mouth open to scream, but no sound came out. She couldn't swim, Eric couldn't either. For a moment that lasted an eternity, he just stood there, paralyzed by fear. He could have run for help. He could have screamed, but he did nothing. He just turned around and ran as fast as his legs could carry him. Away from the pier, away from the lake, away from Ellen's face fading underwater. He ran and never told a soul. Eric snapped back to the present, tears mixed with sweat and dirt on his face. He hadn't killed Ellen, but he had left her to die. The sound of something dragging on the sand came from behind him. He turned. Ellen's ghost was slowly coming toward him. No more fast, jerky movements. Her face was no longer just angry. It was full of the sorrow of a lonely child. Eric shouted with a broken voice, "I'm sorry, I was just scared." Ellen's ghost, ignoring him, came closer and closer. Now she was right in front of Eric. Her white, empty eyes looked at Eric's tear-streaked face for the last time, and then slowly turned toward the black surface of the water. Just as she had come, she faded into the mist, leaving Eric alone with his truth. She hadn't come for revenge. She had come to make sure that from now on, Eric too would drown in that same cold water, every single night.
It's all about humanity.